Hey there, and welcome into Maybe I'm the Crazy One podcast. And I'm your host, Alex Chandler. Never being one to share a take with anyone I know, I figured I'd start by taking down my ideas and sharing them here. Every week, we will explore parts of the sports world, and I'll give you my viewpoints. Maybe I'm a genius, or maybe I'm just crazy. Tune in with me and find out for yourself. Hey guys, and welcome into episode 13 of Maybe I'm the Crazy One podcast. I'm your host, Alex Chandler. I want to say thank you everybody for understanding that we didn't have a show last Friday. We had some difficulties here at the podcast, and so we had to delay, just basically skip the show. We'll also be missing the end of this month, the beginning of next month. As we'll miss a Friday show and a Tuesday show, so we'll hit a Tuesday and a Friday as well. So you won't be without content for a full week. It's just you'll be missing content. We'll short two shows basically because the preseason will end on the 28th of August, and then the regular season won't start until the 8th of September. We will take off that week. In between, we will recap week 3 of the preseason and roster moves, but then that Friday we'll take off, and then we'll also take off the Tuesday before we release a special episode that Thursday prior to the season, and then we'll go back to a regular schedule for football. Kind of what shows are going to look like for the next few weeks. On Tuesdays we will be recapping the week of sports, the weekend rather, of NFL sports in the preseason, who looked good, who did not look good, what I think about certain roster bubbles that may be happening. So today, for example, we're going to be talking about a couple players as well as a couple teams that happened, that played this last weekend and throughout week 1 of the preseason, and my thoughts about it. And then on Fridays, we are going to break down and preview the games ahead, and that's also what the football season will look like. However, with football season, we'll also eventually have basketball to talk about, and so we'll also sprinkle in some of those as well. Additionally, as we move closer into October and November, we're going to have MLS Cup playoffs, as well as in November have the World Cup, and so those will be things that we also talk about at those times. And so today, Like I said, we are going to break down we're going to break down week 1 of the preseason. We're going to talk about a couple quarterbacks that are rookies that played this weekend that I have tremendous amounts of respect for. One I've gained more respect for, but the other one I started with respect for sure. We're going to talk about a couple of North Dakota guys and how they looked in the preseason. We'll also take a look at some people that I've been really critical of this preseason, that performed this weekend. And pre the preseason, I've been really critical of. Spoiler alert, one of them is Jalen Hurts. I might have been wrong on him. And so we're going to break down where I've been wrong a little bit as well. We'll talk a little bit about some of the schedule stuff that has came out for the NBA as well. But ultimately, this is going to be a lot of breakdown of week 1 of the preseason. So, again, thank you everybody who's here right now. Remember to like, rate, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff that we ask you to do every episode. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So let's start off on Thursday. We had New York and New England, and the Giants beat the Patriots. Then we had Tennessee and Baltimore, where Baltimore won their 21st consecutive preseason game, which was an NFL record. They haven't lost a preseason game, I think, since 2015. So that's really impressive. They won that game. On Friday, we had 5 matchups. It was Atlanta and Detroit. Atlanta beat Detroit. Desmond Ridder looked really good in that game, and we'll talk about him here in just a minute. Cleveland had Deshaun Watson on the field against Jacksonville. Cleveland won. Deshaun Watson was terrible, so that's excellent. Arizona was at Cincinnati, and Arizona, they scored a bunch of times in the first three quarters and then none in the fourth, and we'll get to that today as well. But they beat the Bengals 36-23. Then the Eagles and the Jets played. The Eagles went up 14-0, and then the Jets won the game 24-21. Pretty important in this game as well. Zach Wilson tore his meniscus and will be out a minimum of 2 to 4 weeks, but they're not going to rush him back, and Joe Flacco will start until he is back. And then the nightcap was Green Bay at San Francisco, where Jordan Love played the most of the game, and they lost 28-21. Saturday was the most games on the day. I think it was 7 on the day. We had Kansas City at Chicago. Chicago won 19-14, but the Chiefs' primary offense was literally perfect. Carolina was at Washington, and Carolina beat Washington. Baker Mayfield started that game as we told you he would 2 months ago. So, and they won it 23-21. Carson Wentz is somebody who we'll talk about today as well. Indianapolis was at Buffalo. Buffalo won 27-24. Nothing really to talk about in that game. There, Buffalo wasn't really trying too many things out. They're more so looking at the preseason for their depth, but they still ended up winning that game, so that's interesting. Seattle at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh came back and won that game 32-25. We will be talking about Kenny Pickett today. We're not going to talk anything about really Geno. He started the game. He played fine. Drew Lock came in, played fine. But we'll get to how I felt about second half performances here in a little bit. Miami was at Tampa Bay. Really interesting first game matchup, but Miami won that 26-24. New Orleans was at Houston, and Houston won 17-13, led by Jeff Driscoll. Dallas was at Denver, and Denver won 17-7, and this is more about the fact that Dallas lost to all of Denver's backups. None of the starters played. Then both of the Los Angeles teams played each other on Saturday night, the Rams beating the Chargers, and now there's a question of, did the Rams find the next Cooper Kupp in Lance McCutcheon? And then on Sunday, we had the Vikings play at Las Vegas Raiders Stadium with a terrible field, and the Raiders pulled off the win 26-20. Again, Derek Carr, Devontae Adams, we don't see him. So, that is a complete and full breakdown of the scores from week 1, in case you hadn't seen them or heard about them at all. I'm going to highlight a couple things, and we're going to start with the game on Thursday since it happened on Thursday. And that's Malik Willis, guys. And I don't mean to be the guy that says I told you so, but I told you so. I told you 2 months ago that Malik Willis was going to be the best quarterback from this draft. I told you he was going to be the guy, and I told you that Malik Willis, for all intents and purposes, was underdrafted and was going to be the next Russell Wilson-esque type quarterback. And I said he was going to be better than Dak has been for the Cowboys. And then when we talked about Kenny Pickett last 2 weeks ago, I said that it was a mistake and that Malik Willis should have been taken number 1. And then Malik Willis went out and he did absolutely whatever he wanted to do within reason Thursday night in the preseason game. And he started the game, and so he was playing against Baltimore starters because they take these things seriously and they wanted to win. And Malik Willis, all he did was have a 50-yard zinger, run for over 30 yards, throw over 50% completion percentage, and run for a touchdown in his debut. And it was made a bigger deal than I think it actually is when Vrabel pulled him and he said he wanted to see him pass more. First and foremost, with how electric he was in that game, and I watched all 17 of his snaps, or however many exactly it was, for 9 of them, it was 21 snaps, sorry. For 9 of them, you handed the ball off. And at one point, it was like 6 in a row. So either he's checking into those plays and it was working because you guys were getting 4, 6, 8 yards a carry with Chestnut, or, it was designed that way and he can't throw a pass on a run play. Additionally, on the plays that he ran, he had to run and scramble to do those. It wasn't a situation where he was choosing to run instead of pass. There was one time when he escaped. He spun out. He went from right to left and spun out. He immediately put his head down and ran, but he also ran for another 9 yards and picked up a first down there. So I think he was okay with the decisions that he made running. He still threw 11 passes as well, 6 for 11, 55 yards and a touchdown. 78 yards and a touchdown. So, he was still great for the time that he played, and then they ended up losing. They were winning when he came out. They were losing when the game was over. So, what does that mean for not Kenny Pickett? I'm sorry. What does that mean for Malik Willis? Well, I think it's really simple, guys. I've seen the Titans' schedule. We talked about it when we broke down the AFC South. They start off with a more challenging schedule than you would like to. And so, is it big to question that if they start 3-5, that after they play their game in Week 8, Ryan Tannehill is on a different team? Is it big to question that they could potentially move Ryan Tannehill if there's a big quarterback that is lost, and because they have Malik Willis? Or do you hold on to Ryan Tannehill as a backup and still start Malik Willis because he gives you a better chance and you get to see the young player play? Well, I think the personal answer that I like to choose a lot of times is the trade. In this case, I have a couple options. Of course I do, right? That might work a little bit better. And of course, sooner than later, I think these trades would be better for the team receiving Ryan Tannehill. And so I think your first trade that you got to look at is the New York Giants. I think it makes way too much sense. Brian Daboll was able to work with Josh Allen, a big, inaccurate quarterback that wasn't super impressive but had a big arm. Ryan Tannehill may not have the arm strength that a Josh Allen has, but what he also has is the veteran presence and the propensity to try to make the right play. Not necessarily that he does all the time, but that he tries to make the right play. I think that's really critical. And I think if you're the Giants and you really want to have a chance to win games this year, it's not going to be with Daniel Jones. Now, I understand that you need to see what you have from Daniel Jones. And so you start the season, say Week 8 comes around, and you guys are also sitting in a bad spot. Could you trade for Ryan Tannehill and have him for the rest of this year and cut him next year if it doesn't work out because you can get off his money, there's no dead cap for you? Or do you keep him at that rate, and have your quarterback next year potentially re-sign him for longer? Players are playing for longer. I don't think Ryan Tannehill thinks he's done after next year. And so with that all being said, we could see the Giants, retain him, and then Ryan Tannehill may be able to have a third act in his career that we didn't expect. So that's really interesting. Another really cool or interesting place that I could see him potentially going is Tampa Bay. And this is more so about projection, but what if you went and got Ryan Tannehill for a 4th round pick, a conditional 4th or a 3rd, and he's on your team for next year? He learns your offense this year, learns the scheme. He's ready to go when Tom's not there next year because he's retired / moved on to the Dolphins. So you can look at those things because I think Malik Willis is that good. And I think by Week 9, he would give you your best chance to win football games, especially if you're losing football games. Now, obviously, if you're winning, this becomes a non-starter, right? Ryan Tannehill is winning. You don't change your starting quarterback in the midst of having somebody who's performing well and winning games. But if they're not performing, if Ryan Tannehill gets hurt, because that may be something that happens as well, I think that the Titans get better by starting Malik over Ryan. And to a similar effect, I know when we talked about the NFC South, that I said that I had trust that Marcus Mariota could be a starting quarterback again in this league, and I still believe that. But Desmond Ridder looked really good for the Falcons as well. And so you can say it was backups, you can say that it was preseason, it doesn't really matter. That's totally fine, but at some point in time, the production that matters on the field, what happens, it counts. And so it should matter in the same accord as well. And so if somebody similar has, a certain stat line, and then he comes out and does that as well, and we say one person did well, one person didn't do well, that's unfair. And so he did well. He had a great stat line. He performed. He rushed the ball well when he was pressed into running, and so that's good for them. I would like to see Marcus Mariota still, but I think Desmond Ridder could be the starter by the end of the year too. He looked good enough to do it. He looked poised. I don't see the reason why you don't want to start your quarterback, except for like exclusive circumstances like Jimmy G and Trey Lance, Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes. Give them that time to really sit, to learn things behind somebody who's been there for a while, like they're doing with Malik Willis and Ryan Tannehill. The only difference is he obviously has way more talent than Ryan Tannehill does. So with Desmond Ridder, I think he'll be a starter next year for sure. Malik definitely is a starter next year. I think he could be the starter this year. But there's a big push for somebody to be the starter day one right now, and that's Kenny Pickett. Because Kenny Pickett came out, and let me just double check the stats here for us, but on Saturday, he came out, and he came back in this game that they were losing in the second half. Kenny Pickett threw for 95 yards, went 13 for 15, and had 2 touchdowns. And when he came into the game, it was at halftime. They were up 17-10 in Pittsburgh, and then it was 17-17. He got to touch the ball. They went and got a touchdown. Then they scored on the last play of the game from scrimmage to win the game 32-25. And so Kenny Pickett's getting a lot of love right now because he was poised. He showed command of the offense and virtually was better than what we saw the rest of the game in terms of Mason Rudolph or Mitch Trubisky. That being said, he had an entire half to show this. Tribs played the first possession, then Rudolph played the rest of the first half, and then Kenny played against all backups and third stringers in the second half. And so I wanted to say this. First off, from that game, George Pickens had an incredible touchdown, but was out-received by Gunnar Olszewski. And I don't think Gunnar Olszewski is better than George Pickens, let alone being better than the rest of their receivers that didn't play, like Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. And so, to that same record, I can't say that Kenny Pickett is better than Mason Rudolph and Mitch Trubisky because we didn't see as much of them in the game as we saw of those, of Kenny Pickett. And so it's a little unfair to put these expectations on Kenny Pickett compared to Trubisky and Rudolph. I really personally still think that Tribs could be the guy. Like we talked about with Ben last 2 weeks ago now, the reports from camp weren't great, but in the game, they scored a touchdown and they were leading the game when he came out. I think that's critical. They were up 14-0 at one point, 17-10 at halftime. And so Mason and Mitch were able to score 17 points on a lot of predominant starters and second stringers. And then guys that aren't going to make the team for Seattle gave up, 15 additional points. And it just happened to all be to one quarterback. So I'm not going to place too much stock into Kenny Pickett doing that, but he did show me something that I did not anticipate or expect from him yet. And so that's really good. And so if he can do it again, in game 2, game 3, maybe game 1 of the regular season, we could see Kenny Pickett be the starter. Just based on the fact that, get him out there, get the reps, let him have the feel of it. And I think Mike Tomlin's going to make the best decision for this team to win, whether it's the guy that they just gave a 2-year, $20 million contract to, if it's their homegrown guy that they already had, or it's the guy that they drafted in the first round. They all three have a real good reason to start, and so I don't know if we're going to see any of them. However, or I guess we have to see one of them technically, but I don't know if we're going to see anything other than Trubisky. I don't know if we will see Mason Rudolph be the guy. I don't know if we will see Kenny Pickens start, or will he be the third string quarterback throughout the season? It'll be really interesting to see. But right now, my money is on Trubisky starting the season. I'm not going to put money on Trubisky ending the season, though. If they're winning, if they're in the playoff hunt, obviously you stay with your quarterback that got you there. But, if Pickens develops the way that they anticipate him doing, I don't see any reason why you couldn't start him. So let's see what happens, and we'll go from there. A couple guys that played this weekend, though, they are the unquestioned starters on their teams, like a Patrick Mahomes, Mac Jones, Matt Ryan. But then there's two guys that both went to North Dakota State that are both now going to be starting quarterbacks, and their job is unquestioned as well. And that's Trey Lance and Carson Wentz. And we all know my personal feelings on Carson Wentz. I think he's a top 10 quarterback talent. I think he has all of the tools to succeed. The only one he's missing is that thing inside of his brain. But all that I think that he needs there too is somebody to believe in him and somebody to really fully have his back. The 1 year that we saw that he was healthy was the MVP caliber season. I don't think that was a fluke. He's been able to show and recreate some of those things before. I just don't think he's had the support that he's deserved to get there. And so because of that, he ends up typically falling in as a lower tier quarterback. And so I still think that it's important that he was the leader of that team before he got injured. I give him credit for the Super Bowl that they won as well, because without them having those home games, they don't win those games against Atlanta, and they don't smash the Vikings the way that they did. And so that doesn't even give Nick Foles the opportunity to be in the Super Bowl. So because of Carson Wentz, the Eagles were in the Super Bowl, and so that Super Bowl ring that he has matters, and it counts. And that gives him the same number of Super Bowl rings as Matt Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, a lot of guys that are still in the league that have rings. Russell Wilson comes to mind as well. And really, it's Brady and a bunch of guys that have one right now. And so Carson Wentz is one of those guys. And there's been these stories from camp that he's been inaccurate and unable to really command the offense, and then he comes out and he goes 5 for 7 and they score, and that's great. And they lose their game, but they showed out well. And so shout out to Carson Wentz, shout out to that offense. I hope that the Commanders do well. They don't do better than my Eagles, and we'll get to Jalen Hurts in a minute. And I don't think they will do better than my Eagles if Jalen Hurts continues to perform the way that we saw on Friday. But I got to see it again more from Jalen. We'll talk about it here soon. But the other guy we got to talk about too is Trey Lance. And it's ironic that both him and Carson Wentz came from North Dakota State, Division II school. And both of them have been, criticism of accuracy problems and inability to command the offense. And then they come out and they rock it out. Trey Lance was 6 for 6, 80 yards and a touchdown. Just like Patrick Mahomes was, just like Jalen Hurts was. These guys were great. He scored. He was excellent. They did exactly what they needed to do inside of that offense. So I don't think that there is an issue or a concern with them commanding and controlling the offense. I think it's more about our own personal perception of these guys playing at a lower level division school. I think there's a lot less stigma around the guys that go to smaller schools like a Wyoming for Josh Allen or Miami of Ohio for Big Ben back then. But, for guys that come from Division II schools, there's just true stigma that, oh man, they can't play. It's the same reason that Malik Willis was drafted as low as he was, or that Desmond Ridder was taken after Kenny Pickett, is because they played at Malik Willis was at Liberty, and Desmond Ridder was at Cincinnati, and Kenny Pickett was at Pitt. Call it what it is. And so, I think that has something to play into it. But ultimately, I think these two guys are going to be great. And as I've told you previously, I think they both can compete for the playoffs. And I've already told you as well, I think that the 49ers are going to be making it back to the Super Bowl this year. So I think with all that being said, we're in a great spot to potentially see some really great play from two really great quarterbacks from a really great school. And, to top it all off, they both played extremely well in week 1. Granted, again, it's preseason. What does it actually mean? Not a whole lot, but they both played well in the preseason. Another player that played really well in the preseason that I have to admit I might be wrong on is Jalen Hurts. And I know he took over for Carson, and all the words and praise that I just gave to Carson. If Jalen can pass the ball like he did against the Jets, and granted, again, preseason and it's the Jets, so it's double plus for in terms of seeing production. But if Jalen can produce at the level that he did passing, that he did in week 1 against the Jets, where he was 6 for 6, 80 yards and a touchdown, and not really getting A.J. Brown involved and not having Devonta Smith, it's the sky's the limits for that team, man. And Jalen could see himself easily, let alone as a top 10 guy by the end of the season. He could see himself in an MVP, as an MVP candidate. Because I believe that the team's going to be good enough to win a lot of games this year for them. And if he can produce at that level, I got to eat the crow, man, and say, wow, he's a franchise quarterback. And Nick Saban was wrong on him, and Doug Peterson was right on him. And so, ultimately, we'll see what ends up happening with Jalen. And for my sake, as a fan of the Eagles, I hope he's great. And he did definitely show that, but I don't know how much of that is it's the Jets and their personnel that they have, how much it is the preseason and you're not giving out your defensive schemes in the preseason. Typically, it's only offensive plays, and even then, it's more of the vanilla offensive play. I want to see you run a post. I want to see you do this. It's not. I'm actually practicing things for game day because you don't want to put that on film. And so we'll see what happens. And ultimately, I could be wrong here, and I will be absolutely okay with being wrong. Another thing that I could be wrong on too, honestly, it could be the Lions. I could be wrong on the Lions, and I don't want to be recency bias to Hard Knocks and the Jamal Williams, a whole spiel that he gave at the end of that episode on Wednesday last week. But, when you look at their team outside of the quarterback position, their offense is pretty well put together. They got Jamison Williams, they have Amon-Ra St. Brown, TJ Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift, and Jamal Williams in the backfield. So, they've got 5 guys that could go deep. And so now that I think about it, they might be a better team if they get a quarterback. So